Good morning, everyone. At this time, I'll call the Crow Wing County Regular Board Meeting for October 13th, 2020 to order. If you'll stand with me for the pledge and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the record, we do have Commissioner Coring joining us through Teams. Commissioner Brecken will be absent today, so there will be 4 commissioners in the room. At this time, I would like to have Eric Charpentier come to the microphone. Good morning, new director of our Crow Wing County HRA, and if you'll introduce yourself, Eric, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning, Chairman Barrows, commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to just introduce myself for a couple of minutes. As Chairman Barrows stated, my name is Eric Charpentier. I am the new incoming executive director for the Brainerd and the Crow Wing County and the Crosby HRAs. So a few hats that I get to wear on that. It's an honor to take over these agencies and to lead a staff of dedicated individuals that aim, to provide affordable housing and redevelopment opportunities to strengthen our neighborhoods and our community. Little information about myself. I am a lifelong Brainerd area resident. I am a product of the Brainerd public school systems. I do have deep roots in the community, and I am proud to be able to serve the residents of the county. For the past 13 years before this, I worked in the banking industry, where I've met a number of you throughout the number of other organizations that I've been involved with, such as the Brainerd JCs, the Brainerd Unified Fund, Cayena Range Economic Development, and Lakes Area Habitat for Humanity. I also did serve as a commissioner on the Brainerd HRA's board as well. As I transitioned from a career in banking to a career serving our county residents, I cannot be more excited for the opportunities that lie in front of us, especially with the Housing Trust Fund. Housing is one of the most basic and vitally important needs that our county residents have, and the HRA is committed to providing those safe and affordable opportunities to those that need it the most. I do have some large shoes to fill from Ms. Bergman. I am comforted in the fact knowing that she's just down the street where I can call on her for anything, and she has left me with an inherited great staff to work with, and they do an amazing job, and just couldn't be more proud to lead them. If you guys have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Any questions? Commissioner Franzine? Commissioner Coring, any questions for Mr. Charpentier?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Welcome him to his new position.
Thank you, Commissioner Coring.
Likewise.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate it.
Thank you for stepping up and accepting at least applying for the position and then being awarded the position. We look forward to it.
Looking forward to working with you guys all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have open forum. Do we have anybody on the phone, Therese?
No.
No? Anybody in the audience that would like to speak on anything other than what's on our agenda today? If you'll come forward, give us your name and your address, and it's a 2-minute opportunity to speak.
Troy Scheffler, 26359 Shandy Trail, Merrifield, Minnesota. The reason I'm here is I've been trying to get a hold of your sheriff, and I'm not sure if he's around. But to give you a little context, I attended a Nisswa Township meeting after the antics of the mayor, along with the police department. There's a lot of drama going on there. So I attended this emergency meeting after Mr. Heidman's arrest. I'm sure you're all aware of it. Hopefully you are if you're concerned about what's going on in your county. Well, to give you a little context, the whole thing was surrounding the TZD program, Towards Zero Deaths. It's a shakedown program. If you actually look at it, they tax the state's taxpayers an exorbitant amount of money to redistribute it amongst a bunch of departments to pay officers time and a half to shake down people more for going 1 mile per hour with the speeding limit. Yes, this is literally how the program works, to seatbelt tickets. And they managed to get officers to leave their jurisdiction to run up what is nothing short of a quota system. talk to your officers if you're concerned. That'd be great, but this is how the program actually works. So no, it's not a matter of supporting the police, not supporting the police. It's a matter of a shakedown, and it's an incredibly bad image. So I went to this township meeting because I knew exactly what was going on and why the mayor was so disappointed in what was going on. Yes, he should have handled the thing differently. I certainly would have, but that's a whole different issue. That's what the courts are there for. That's why he's getting charged. Whole different issue. Anyhow, so I'm down there. I see probably 15 police officers uniformed, which, being that I'm well aware of law enforcement, I kind of dabbled in the industry myself. So virtually every department has a uniform policy. You don't leave your jurisdiction, especially to dogpile an elected official, to show it was a show of force to intimidate the mayor. It was nothing short of that. Plus, a lot of them were being paid despite, and this was chief lying about only one officer being on duty. There were a number of officers on duty being paid from different jurisdictions.
Okay,
Problem.
I'm going to interrupt you right now. You've had your 2 minutes, and I appreciate your message. We do have a deputy in the audience, and you could speak to him after the meeting if you would like about this issue. I understand what you're saying, and I think I've heard the message previously, but I understand what you write, and you have a right to say that, but you can go with the officer after the meeting and arrange to speak with the sheriff. So thank you very much.
I've arranged that, and this is where I'm going to go to, so I'd ask for leave for 1 minute to cover what's going to be a lawsuit against the county.
Sorry, I'm going to hold you to the 2 minutes. That's the ruling that the chair has made, and so I'll have to ask you to sit down.
Okay, I'll just
Thank you.
have the lawsuit served then.
So at this time, we do have one change to the agenda. We're going to move number 7, I believe it is, to the end of the meeting. There's some negotiating going on at this time, so at this time, is there any other additions to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair. We need.
Pardon me? Oh, excuse me, I missed one here. We need to approve the minutes from the last meeting, so I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion.
Second.
Commissioner Franzine seconds the motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows,
Commissioner votes aye. Motion passes. Review and approval of the agenda. We look,
To approve.
Commissioner Franzine moves the motion
And we're moving 7 to where?
just to the end of the agenda, so it's
To
just, it would be number,
after the county administrator?
I think after the county engineer is where we would move it, so be after number 10.
I'll second the motion then.
Commissioner Hoag seconds the motion. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows,
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Consent agenda. Any questions regarding the consent agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to approve. Excuse me.
Yeah, I can't see the entire agenda, but I wanted to see if there was, part of the list, a Cartway petition for,
It's on there.
Well, that's number 7, and that's been moved to the, little later in the agenda.
Mr. Chair, there are agendas out in the hall too for the public.
So with that, I would look for a motion to
Chair.
approve the consent agenda. Oh,
Commissioner Coring?
Mr.
did
Chair?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Could I ask, Mr. Chairman, about 6.8 and maybe just have an explanation? I don't know if that was talked about at the Environmental Committee, but I guess I'm unaware of that joint powers agreement, and as you know, I don't care for joint powers agreement, so I guess I'd like to just have a little explanation before I carte blanche vote for that.
Mr. Griffin, if you would
Sure.
explain.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, 6.8 is a joint powers agreement.
with the Department of Natural Resources. It's a mechanism so that they can help reimburse us for the changes that we've made out at the landfill to combat our chronic wasting disease. You may remember last season we decided to invest in a $100,000 fence to go around our spray field to keep wildlife off of it so they're not eating the grasses and stuff from the discharge spray from the landfill. And this would be the mechanism in which we can have the money transferred to us to help assist with some of the costs incurred.
Commissioner Coring?
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Gary.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Hoag moves the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you'll call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine. Aye. Commissioner Barrows.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to number 8 now, Community Services and the Statewide Improvement Partnership Grant, the SHIP program. Cara Griffin.
Okay,
Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. Today I'll be providing information about the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership Grant, also known as SHIP. We are asking for your approval of the SHIP amendment to extend the current grant cycle, as well as approval for the new grant agreement that would bring us into 2020 through 2025. As a reminder, SHIP is a statewide grant with the Minnesota Department of Health administering to counties and tribes. The purpose is to support locally driven strategies to promote healthier communities, and the big picture goal is to reduce healthcare costs for preventable diseases. So with the support of the SHIP grant here in Crow Wing County, we, along with Essentia Health, have formed Crow Wing Energized. That is our county health and wellness movement. Essentially, our mission is to make the healthy choice the easy choice. So moving forward, the guiding principles state that we will collaborate and partner with diverse groups of stakeholders. We want to be inclusive. We bring community members to the table. We feel that they know best on how to create a healthier community. And we prioritize sustainable evidence-based efforts that have the greatest impact. And we strive to be outcome and goal-orientated. We feel that we need to be able to demonstrate that we truly are making a difference here in Crow Wing County. The Crow Wing Energized Steering Committee is made up of community leaders who will be able to influence the policy, system, and environmental change in their respective realm of influence. You'll see on this slide that we have a pretty diverse group that represents not only government leaders, but business, the media relations. We rely heavily on our relationship with the Brainerd Dispatch to be able to promote health and wellness here in our community. The steering committee members collaborate on and prioritize the strategies that Crow Wing Energized will implement during the year. We have 4 primary goal groups: healthy choices, mental fitness, workplace wellness, community connections. Those are our 4 goal groups where the work actually happens and we implement the strategies. We will be adding 2 subgroups over this next year. One of them is a workplace wellness learning cohort, and the second one is a community equity advisory group. So health problems are influenced by policies, systems, and environments. We know that it is easier to sustain unhealthy behaviors if policy, systems, and environment foster that. So Crow Wing Energized's role is to support healthier behaviors by influencing that policy, system, and environment so that the healthier choice is the easier choice. Currently, we're working with 88 active partners on PSE in our community. This slide shows an example. One of them is the healthy vending in the work sites. I know I look a little too eager in that picture about our new vending program that we received, and the community garden at the senior center, active schools and active recess, as well as T21 assistance with the city of Pequot Lake. So those are just a very few examples. Again, aligned with one of our principles, using evidence-based programs. One of the probably the most popular or common program that you might be aware of is our lifestyle change class offerings. It's based on the NDPP, or National Diabetes Prevention Program. In the last 5 years, we've had over 1,000 people that have completed that program. In 2019, we had 157. Our program here in Crow Wing County is CDC certified or credentialed, and overall the program continues to meet the goals for weight loss and increased activity for those participants. Some more examples of evidence-based programs include those for the 55 plus. We know that Crow Wing County has a higher than state average, and we continue to have significant growth in that age category. So we have Aging Mastery, which is a new program for those over the age of 50. We also have SAIL, S-A-I-L. It's Stay Active and Independent for Life, and Matter Balance. Now, are we making an impact? Since 2019, just as an example of some of the impact numbers, we've had 15 produce pop-ups. We know that food insecurity is relevant in Crow Wing County. We've distributed over 213,000 pounds of food. Over 3,000 families and or individuals have participated or benefited from those pop-ups. Locations have been Essentia or St. Joe's, Westgate Mall, and most recently, we were able to utilize the Central Lakes College for a location. Now, there is a typo in that second box up there. Grants given out to the community, it should read 225,000. Grants have been provided to the county, to partners, so that whether that's the schools, community, or workplaces. We've also provided through the SHIP grant supplies, materials, and equipment to support the strategies within the community. We have 596 community partners that we're collaborating with, or we have over the PSC. Another measure for progress is the county health rankings. The county health rankings actually it's nationwide, and then for each state, the counties are ranked amongst the states. So for the state of Minnesota, we have 87 counties. It's based on health outcomes, factors, behaviors, clinical care, social economic factors, and then physical environment. Since 2015, and you want to be number one. So you want to be the best ranking would be to be number one. So since 2015, the worst that we've been has been 61. We are currently at 40. So currently the 2020, we're rated 40 out of 87, and that's the highest that we've been since 2015. Adult obesity continues to be on the increase in Crow Wing County. So while there have been some positive movement in some areas, obesity rates continue to increase. That's not uncommon to Crow Wing County. Across the state and nation, we continue to struggle with weight. And we know that obesity-related conditions it contributes to heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer, and it's the leading cause of preventable premature death. So what is Crow Wing Energized doing to turn the curve on obesity rates? This is an example of the outcome for a process that we use, results-based accountability, or RBA. For this specific, so obesity, the result is we wanted to increase people eating fruits and vegetables, or have them eating fruits and vegetables every day. This would be adults. We utilized 7 focus groups, including 650 participants, to help us identify the direction that we would go over the next 2 years to turn the curve. So there's a lot of information on the slide, but ultimately, what are we going to do is in the lower right-hand box. The next 4 to 5 slides provide examples of the RBA process that Crowing Energized has used for a few of our identified areas. And I won't go into great detail. Feel free to reach out when you're looking at these in your free time, and we can provide additional information. An area we wanted to highlight is the work that we're doing around mental health or mental fitness here in Crow Wing County. Over the past couple years, we have been able to receive, last year, a $100,000 grant from Sourcewell to work on a social emotional learning using the Sources of Strength program in Crow Wing County schools. Due to COVID, we had a slight delay in rolling that out this spring, so we're looking forward to partnering with the schools this fall and winter to get that implemented. We were awarded another $100,000 from Sourcewell this year to work on mental resiliency with first responders in our community. That program is called Road to Resilience. We received a $10,000 grant from Health Partners to expand our Make It Okay. Our Make It Okay is a campaign to stop the stigma behind mental illness. We have a number of ambassadors, 80 to 100 ambassadors trained within Crow Wing County that are able to deliver that message and provide that presentation to our community. We've also received a $10,000 grant from Crow Wing Power, and we used that to expand our ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences work. So what's next? We plan to continue to do what we have been, along with supporting the community in the response and recovery to COVID. And through the support, if you were to approve that today with SHIP, here's examples of the specific work plan. We would continue with a number of the strategies in the goal group. We would be adding, over the next year, 2 strategies that MDH requires. One of them is well-being. And fortunately for Crow Wing Energized and Crow Wing County, we've already been working on well-being through our mental fitness group due to the support of a number of grantees that I had shared and the partners within the community. So that will not be an additional burden. That'll just be a continuation of what we're already doing. The second strategy is equity. And again, we, in the spring, we as a community decided that equity was something of importance and that we needed to focus on. So even prior to the requirement for SHIP, we began forming an advisory group here in our community. This here is a picture of the Crow Wing Energized team or staff. We have 2 full-time staff along with 4 part-time that work on the strategies here in Crow Wing County. It's pretty impressive what the team can accomplish, and I think it goes to show that we're only able to do what we've been able to achieve based on the community energy and support around Crow Wing Energized. So any questions for me? I know I went through it quite quickly and there was a lot of information shared. And again, we're looking for support of the resolution to approve the amendment of the current grant cycle and enter into a new grant agreement for 2020 through 2025. And the first year, the SHIP grant will be $205,000 for the first year, with the remaining 4 years yet to be determined.
Any questions? Commissioner Coring, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chair.
I would just like to say that it's pretty impressive to move in 4 years from, what was the number, 60 to 40?
61. Yeah.
So I think that's shows what's capable of happening with this grant. So I just think it's a positive investment in our communities and our county. So I look for a motion to approve the amendment and the new contract.
I would make that motion with just the caveat, again, I echo the chairman's words of how far you've came, and yet we still have a lot of work to go in this area, but hopefully with this extension of this grant, it'll allow you the resources you need to get there. So with that, I would make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner Hoag,
Second.
second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine? Aye. Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Congratulations, motion passes.
Thank you.
Number 9 is administrative services and the CARES Act Coronavirus Relief Funds purchase requests. I'm not sure if who's going to handle it. Nick?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. At our Budget Committee meeting last Thursday, we discussed additional requests to use coronavirus relief funds to pay for 5 additional items. On this list were 2 grant matches. We're 20% portion of the Election Cares Grant match. That's $11,951. We also have a FEMA grant match. It's our county portion that we have to pay on any funds we get from FEMA for PPE of $85,000. We also have a request to add outdoor tables, including 2 ADA accessible tables throughout the county campus to allow for more outdoor meeting space and give opportunities for clients and business partners to meet with staff outside of the building in order to maintain social distancing. There's also the request for additional $7,850 in community services for Carry Guides guide licensing. We did request $85.50 in the last board meeting that we approved CRF funds for a 1 year. This is expanding it to a 5-year license agreement to allow staff to continue to use this as the pandemic continues to go on beyond the use or the funds when the funds are accessible to us. And then the final thing on here is a climate control system to be installed into the north garage in the sheriff's office to allow for the PPE that's being stored there to be maintained in a properly controlled environment during the summer months for $23,037. And there were questions related, I think, specifically to the climate control system. And we do have a couple people here that could help answer any questions related to that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I understand there were some questions regarding the climate control system for the Sheriff's North Garage. It's a rooftop unit. It's about 5 tons. It will allow for cooling and humidification control in that space. I was asked for the Sheriff's Department to make this request. There's a concern about the PPE, particularly paper masks. It gets very humid in that space. So that's what the request is for, would be to put air conditioning in the space.
I think for clarification, I think the question was asked by Commissioner Brecken, and I think what he was wondering is, are we air conditioning the entire garage, or are we air conditioning a specific square footage within that footprint?
We would be air conditioning the entire garage, which is about 1,600 square feet.
Okay. I think that was his only trying to understand and clarify what was actually going to happen there.
Okay.
So I think that's the only question I remember, unless one of the other board members.
Well, I guess
Commissioner Hoag.
maybe a question is just exactly how much space is required for the PPE? And then if, I mean, I have nothing against using this money for where it benefits, but I'm just thinking out long-term, you know, the operating cost of this unit and maintenance and long-term preventive maintenance, things like that. Is this something that would be used going forward continually, or just for the storage of the PPP until that is no longer a need. Do we need 16, is it 1,600?
1,600 square feet.
Do we need that for all the PPP storage, or just how much? And I ask because I look around at all of the additional, empty square footage that we have. Is it really a need or a want?
I will let the sheriff's office answer the questions related to logistics of that
Thank you.
material.
Good morning, Commissioners. As you know, the Sheriff's Office is solely responsible for the distribution of the PPE. To have it at a central location within our office is essential instead of having it spread throughout the campus. Officers or deputies would not, possibly not every deputy would have access to it if it's held outside of our office. And when the need is there, it could be during the day, it could be during the night. We're responsible for distribution of the PPE. There are other things within the garage that are stored that would benefit highly from having climate control. We do store some evidence in there. We also store ammunition, which needs to be kept at a temperature-controlled environment. But the main purpose is the PPE of the personal protection equipment.
I think if I might just speak a little bit too, that given the surprise that the pandemic brought to all of us, what we're looking at is the long term, and we don't know when the next one might arrive or that this one is ever going to go away. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to be looking down the road and what we have to do to prepare ourselves for any future events like this that may happen. And all of these have a life expectancy where they age out and we have to replace them regardless, but we can extend that life if we have a climate-controlled environment. Would that be accurate?
That would be very accurate, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Coring?
Mr. Chairman, I would move the adoption of the 9.1, the request for board action.
Commissioner Coring makes the motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Franzine.
Mr. Chair, I do have one question.
Yes.
Nick, you were going to talk to CLA about the 5-year license for the carry guides. What did they have to say?
CLA said that they ideally would be for a 1-year term. If it is normal for us to do a 5-year contract on any licensing, that it would be acceptable for us to do the 5-year. The request was to take the entire amount and allow for that clarification to occur. It will be underneath the dollar amount that's being requested. We are probably going to be looking at doing just a 1-year license agreement, but we're waiting for a little more clarification from CLA on what their thoughts are and if this is a standing practice that we've had before in the county to do a long-term licensing agreement.
So the request is to authorize it, and if it later turns out not to be CARES Act eligible, we will not proceed with it.
Okay. You understand, Commissioner Coring?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Therese, if you would call the roll, please.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Nick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Next, we have the county engineer, Tim. Sponsor City of Cross Lake 2025 Federal Transportation Alternative Grant Application.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I have one item for you today, and it is to once again act as a sponsor for the City of Cross Lake for a federal highway transportation alternatives grant. This is federal money. It's sort of a grant that is offered every year, and in this part of Minnesota, well, go to the next slide. Oh, I can go to the next slide. I'll get into the details in a second. $1.6 million available in the central region of Minnesota. And this is to award funds to things that enhance transportation. It could be, and historic preservation. a lot of projects that are funded through this are bike trails and pedestrian facilities, safe routes to school programs, and things like that, and this one's no different. Last year, the city of Cross Lake and Crow Wayne County partnered for an application, and it actually scored quite well and was awarded some funds, but what was awarded was much lower than our ask, and what that does would shift the local match, more of the local match onto the city and the county, and we decided that that was not worth it, and that we would take what we've learned from the grant last year and improve it and be competitive again this year. And so that's what we're doing. We're going to repackage it a little bit. Last year, the ask was for $410,000. This year, we're hoping to ask for $500,000, so $500,000. And what that encompasses is sidewalks and trails and some crossing enhancements in the city of Cross Lake. And just to orientate you, this is not a very good. I'll start with this one and then I'll get into the aerial. This is the city of, I'm sorry, let me orientate you with this one. Here's the city of Cross Lake proper. It's just to orientate you, this is Andy's, the new community school, the Corps of Engineers campground, Reed's grocery store, the Ace Hardware. So kind of if there's a downtown in Cross Lake, this is the downtown. And one of the reasons why we are applying for this grant and starting last year was there was a lot of effort by the National Loon Center Foundation to bring the Loon Center, that's similar to the National Wolf Center and Eagle Center and things like that are around the state, to Cross Lake. And that will be located, is proposed to be located right here. There's been a lot of hard work done and some legislative action actually to get some funds there. We feel that that's going to bring even more visitors and pedestrians to the city of Cross Lake. And there's already a challenge with vehicle and pedestrian conflict. And so our proposal includes the extension of a trail from here to here. The orange or the yellow there is trail, and the red is sidewalk. And there are currently no sidewalks on this side of the road, but a lot of the businesses are. And you can imagine this campground with 100 sites packed in a normal year. So how many pedestrians are essentially just free for all crossing to the grocery store, the liquor store, the hardware store, and then the retail center. And we felt with the influx of pedestrians that we needed to do better to provide them facilities to safely walk around the community.
If I can just ask you a quick question on that, Tim. When you look at that orange portion,
yes,
and that's still on the other side of the street from the campground, and if the concern is the number of people at the campground, regardless of whether you have a sidewalk on each side of the street, pedestrians still have to cross the street. Will there be some kind of traffic control to allow pedestrians to cross safely, or do they wait for a gap in the traffic pattern to?
Oh, that's a great question. Now I'm gonna go back to this. I've orientated you a little bit. I'm gonna mess up. This symbol that you see right here is enhanced crosswalks and pedestrian facilities. So this is up by, there's an ice cream shop up there called Lakes Country Crafts and Cones. The community school is here. This is Swan Drive crossing enhancement here, and then here at the main entrance to the campground and the downtown portion. So the answer is yes.
So can you explain what enhancement means?
Well, we're looking at a couple options. There's crosswalks there now. There's been some discussion about providing some pedestrian actuated crossings. This is the one actually just like across the street, how you get to the Judicial Center, the one you press the button and it flashes. It's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, actually, is what the name of it is. There's some talk of installing those in strategic areas along here. I was recently contacted by the director of the Cross Lake Community School asking specifically for that, and we're looking to how we can incorporate that into this plan as well. So the answer is yes, we are looking at those. We haven't decided exactly what the configuration will be quite yet.
Okay.
Let me see. So sidewalk is red all the way up to this ice cream shop. And then a trail from here to here. There's nothing that exists along here, but this is the main route for the campers to get their groceries at the grocery store. They walk along the shoulder, and it's that conflict that we're trying to avoid. So that's the basics of it. Our role, Crow Wing County, is the sponsor. Technically, the applicant is the city of Cross Lake. We certainly have vested interest. There's 2 county roads, County Road 3 and County Road 66. And we're working closely with them like we did last year. And what I'm asking today is to, once again, for the board to agree to be the sponsor and the fiscal agent for them. They are actually the grant applicant.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Coring?
No, Mr. Chairman, no questions.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Tim, I'm reminded that we entered into a similar agreement with the city of Jenkins to solicit federal funds for a project at their request. And they later determined that they were not going to honor their part of the agreement, leaving Crow Wing County to hold that bag. What are we doing in this circumstance to avoid that happening again?
Last night, I failed to mention, thank you for asking, I failed to mention that last night I was at the City of Cross Lake City Council meeting, and they passed a resolution to move forward with this. So there is some council action, there was last year as well, council action to partner with us. We have talked about formalizing that, even more formal than it is. There are some more steps along the way, which will include a cost share agreement and those kind of things. So there will be official agreements associated with this when and if the federal money is awarded. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right, so I would look for a motion to approve the resolution that's attached in the packet, the resolution to be the sponsoring agency for the City of Cross Lake Transportation Alternatives application.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Hoag.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Coring. Therese, if you would call the roll, please.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Congratulations, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
All right, we now have a public hearing regarding the Cartway.
Mr. Chair, I believe we have the county attorney here who might be able to help you walk you through the process. Cartway law is generally township government law, and so we find ourselves here today because we are the town board for 2 of the unorganized territories. And so we have gotten a petition for a Cartway, so we need to hold a public hearing. That is scheduled for today. The county attorney is here to advise you on Cartway statute and what options you may have related to the request.
So before the attorney speaks, do we need to open this public hearing officially?
I believe that would be in order.
So at 9:45, we'll open the public hearing regarding the,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Point of order. A motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion, we move to public hearing, open public hearing.
Commissioner Hoag makes a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Franzine seconds the motion. Therese, if you would call the roll, please.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Public hearing is now open at 9:45 a.m. So, Mr. Ryan.
You want me to take my mask off, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Board, both those here and at home. We are here today for the public hearing on the petition for Cartway by the Nelson Preserve. I did take some time this morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for moving this further down on the agenda to meet with the attorneys and at least one representative for both sides of the issue, the petitioner and the landowners over which the Cartway's petitioned to go. And hopefully we will have some continued conversation, but there is not a resolution to the issue today. Today, the purpose for the public hearing is to hear arguments, and I don't know if the parties intend to present evidence or not in regards to what the proposed route of the Cartway would be. And once that route is determined, then we would go into the next phase of determining what the actual damages would be. So no matter what happens here today, the board's going to have this back before them again. The Cartway law is, in my mind, very specific. If you have a parcel of land that is landlocked and there's no access from a public road, then someone can petition for partway if they don't have any legally enforceable access to their property. In my review of the documents, I believe the Nelson Preserve property qualifies for that. So then the question becomes the route to get there and what are the damages ultimately that are to be paid to the affected property owners. I believe there were 12, there may only be 11 right now. One of the lots that will be affected, I think, was bought by another landowner. In any event, that's not the issue before you today. I believe all notice requirements and obligations have been met. The other thing that we need to do, I believe, today is to have some discussion, and I'll present some information to you, and I think the attorneys for each side would like to speak to you as well, in regards to establishing an estimate of what we think the damages may be, ultimately, should the Cartway go in. And when I say estimate, I mean that's what it is. It is an estimate. You will need more information to specifically determine what the actual damages will be, and then that will have to be divided per property owner that will be affected. Or determined, excuse me, per property owner that will be affected. There are a couple of ways we can do that. Hopefully we can work all that out before we get into a long conversations about coming back into another hearing before the board in regards to determining the damages. Some things will have to be done once the route's determined, the survey, what are the impacts to the properties that are going to be affected, and so on. In speaking with the attorneys for both sides, I've told them what my recommendations are going to be, and it may be, if the board should adopt those, and I'll get to those in a moment, that we will need to have staff go back out to this property for a second on-site. The board would not need to go, but you could if you wanted to. We would provide notice to the date and time we'll be there, should that be the route you take, excuse me, to each of the attorneys, who then can notify their various clients that we're going to be there and the purposes for what we're going to be there for. To me, the question comes down to coming off the Marsh Pit Trail or road, what access goes into the Nelson Preserve property. I believe the landowners in the area, not the petitioner, are going to request that there be an access that comes in from the north. The petitioner has requested that it come in on what the blue line I'm looking at, which is called option A, which I believe the board has seen before. And there is an option C, which is an orange line, which also is in play. On the Nelson Preserve property, there is a big wetland that separates a smaller portion of the property to the north and a larger portion of the property to the south, which is primarily where the owners of Nelson Preserve do their hunting, and that gives them the access to the lake. So the question the board is going to have to determine in regards to the access point is what is meaningful access to the property. So I see the maps up now. The blue line is option A. That's what's being requested by Nelson Preserve. I believe Mr. Unger, the landowner, and probably the rest of the landowners who owns the two parcels closest to the Nelson Preserve property would like to see option B, which is to the north of that wetland. Another option would be, if option B were rejected, option C would be that just to the south of the wetland. it would be closer to the wetland and down below a slight hill, the topography of which is not very steep. I just went over that with staff, as opposed to the blue line. That's where I think you may need some more information to see what is the possibility of meaningful access for option A and option C. My opinion is that option B does not provide meaningful access. The attorney for the landowners and Mr. Unger, they disagree with that and think it does provide meaningful access. So ultimately, that's a factual determination the board, you all, are going to have to make. I have a bigger question, or I have a question in my mind, whether option A or option C are even, or if they're different, or if option C, depending upon where you go on that road, would actually be able to be developed. In my opinion, if you have a really steep bluff going into a wetland, and you have erosion issues if you start cutting into the side of the hill. For Commissioner Hogan, Commissioner Francine, and Commissioner Burrows, you might remember this too, though you weren't on the board, when they did the Riverside Drive project. A few years ago, there was questions on the technology of what could you do to upgrade Riverside Drive and prevent the potential erosion if you dug into the hill. It became more expensive, but that was an issue. That same logic applies to if you're going to try to develop a hill on a road here upside the wetland. To me, the case law says it's if a steep grade and they have to build this up the steep grade or along the side of it, it's not meaningful access. If there's another route that can come in flatter, which would be at the top of the hill. But I don't have enough information to give you a recommendation on that portion of it as I sit here today. That might be something you want staff to go back out and get. Once we have that information, I've discussed with attorneys for both sides, we would then give that to them. And depending upon what that is, and if they wish to address the board again, I would support the board giving them the opportunity to come back and address the new information we acquired, because I think that's fair, and they both said that they could agree with that, just FYI. And so the determination then is going to be what is the route that gets followed after you get to where you see option B, and option C, and then option A goes all the way down. So, and what is meaningful access? Meaningful access, in my opinion, not trying to give you a definition, dictionary definition or anything like that, but it is just what it sounds like. You have access to your property to have meaningful use of your property, not necessarily in the way you're using it, but meaningful use of the property. In this instance, the Nelson Preserve uses this for hunting. I believe it's exclusively for hunting purposes. When you look at that wetland, I'm told that there is a land bridge in there, that maybe you could build a corduroy road. I don't know if you can or can't. But the DNR is going to have something to say about filling in a wetland to put in a corduroy road. And what a corduroy road is, to my understanding, is you take a bunch of railroad ties or some kind of timbers, you put them across you dig them into the wetland, then you fill class 5 over the top of it, or some similar type of a thing. That's not something historically Crow Wing County would support either. And then your other option is to build a bridge, and we don't necessarily support people building bridges across wetlands or developing wetlands when we can find another access into their lake. That doesn't mean you can't approve it and you can't find that's the best route and creates meaningful access. Historically, we just haven't done that this way. And as you know, this is my 26th year as county attorney. I think this is the second time I've had to deal with a Cartway issue, and I don't remember the first one. So I'm learning again as we go here. That becomes partially the same discussion with option C. If that is down in a wetland area, is that something the county, from a public policy perspective, wants to start promoting? We're going to develop accesses off of cartways or for cartways in a wetland area. Now, if it's high enough and it's dry and the slope's not too steep and it screens it more from Mr. Unger as opposed to option A, that might be something you'll consider. Again, it's factual and it's your determination to make after you've listened to parties from both sides. However, in my review of the law, the county board, most of the time it's a township, so if I say township board, you are the township board right now for this unorganized territory. You can vary from the requested route should you choose to do so. And in order to do so, you have to find 3 things. You have to be able to determine that the route that you choose that varies from the requested route is less disruptive to the property owners that the land's going over. It's less damaging, in other words, it's creating less damage to the property that the cartway is going over. And it's in the public's best interest to vary from the petitioned route. The first two can be relatively easy to make a determination on, and I don't intend to try to do a lot of quoting of cases and stuff here today. The third one gets to be much more difficult. In my opinion, in this route, for this cartway petition, there really is no public interest. The cartway will be a public road, and it's always going to stay a public road, and there may or may not be ways to petition to make it a private driveway. That's not before us today. A cartway, by definition, is a public road, which means from County Road 105 to the border of the Nelson Preserve property, no matter what route you take, the public can drive in and out of there. They can't access anybody's property. They can drive in, turn around, go back out. But that's what it is. There's no public land that this is going to access. So I see no public purpose for this cartway. That's why I don't see how using a different route is going to be in the public's best interest. Again, that's not my determination. I'm just sharing my opinion and some legal background with you. It's your determination to make. Also, there's already a road there which has been developed for option A. Anything else is going to require the clearing of some land, as nominal as it may be, to create the alternative routes, B or C. And that's something I think you should take into effect. Also, in regards to option C, is it going through a wetland, and what is the potential impact on the wetland if it's going along the side of the hill? And so that's where I think you maybe want staff to go back and give you some more information on. You've been there, so maybe you can make that decision. I got mostly involved in this other than a couple of legal questions yesterday. So I have not been out there. I have not seen this property, but I'd be happy to do so if that's something you want me to do. And so those are some of the questions that you need to make a determination ultimately after you listen to the attorneys for both sides in regards to what route you want to select today. This was noticed for public hearing to try to make a determination on the route for the cartway. I believe you can make a preliminary determination if, for instance, you're looking at A and C, that perhaps you want some more information, so then you would come in and do that. You could do the same with A, B, and C. It doesn't vary a whole lot until you get to where option B comes off of there, and then there are some options. And again, if you do that, then that's going to be something we'll have to give any additional information to the parties, and we'll have to give them an opportunity to come back in all fairness to have a further discussion with you. As far as the route goes, that's what I was going to present, but I can field any questions any of the five of you may have.
Any questions for?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Don, I think you kind of answered my question. Therese, can you put that map back up there? So Don, let's just hypothetically, the county board or the town board says where that number 33 is, and we said, oh, well, we're going to have, give you permission to have the cartway right on the property line there. So we can't say that, or it has to go where they petitioned for it to go?
Commissioner Coyne, when you say 33, are you talking about the number 33 at the top of the page there?
Yeah.
So again, if you want to vary from the requested route, the things you have to be able to establish is it's less disruptive to the landowners across whose land it's going, it's less damaging to the landowners across this land it's going, and it's in the public's best interest. And so you would have to be able to factually make findings and conclusions on those 3 points to vary from the road. And so I don't know where County Road 105 comes across the top of what you're looking at, so that it could go straight down that line, topography line or whatever it is on 33 to the 04 or wherever you would make the determination. But that is what you would have to make a determination on to move it over to where you're suggesting.
So is that, Don, is that case law or is that statute, Minnesota statute that you're citing those findings that you're talking about?
Both.
Both, okay. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Nope, he just asked mine.
So at this point, the attorneys for the petitioner, and I forget the other term, so I'd like to give them an opportunity to speak. I am going to limit it to 3 minutes, so if...
Mr. Chair, if I could, before you open it up to the public and their attorneys, there's one other point that I think they're going to want to address, and I'd like to give you a little background and my perspective on first.
Okay.
So ultimately, the county board is going to have to make a determination on what the actual damages to the affected landowners over which the cartway is going is, okay? And no county money can be spent on these proceedings. And so you're gonna have to make a determination in regards to what the county's expenses are as well, and that's all at the cost of the petitioner. That's not in dispute with anybody, that's just the law. The statute says that we can require a bond or some other sureties for an estimate of those damages, or we could require a payment in form of a cleared check or cash for an estimate of what those damages would be. As I mentioned earlier, I can give you no guidance on what the actual damages will be, but I have calculated some estimates, which I think ultimately today you should consider entering a directive or an order, or actually it should be a resolution as to what the estimate is, and require that before we proceed forward any further, that the petitioners deposit that money with Crow Wing County. And then we would use that money to offset the costs of the county, maybe incurred to date, and then we'd say maybe it's a time and materials, just keep track of the hours we're spending, whether it be the commissioners, land services department, our department, whomever that may be, and then we reimburse ourselves. Plus, there's a pool of money sitting there, so that when you do make a damages decision, there's already money in the bank to pay the affected landowners who have incurred a loss. But it's an estimate, and it's just an estimate. I think the attorneys for each side are going to give you different numbers than I'm going to give you, but that's up to them. Then ultimately you need to make a decision. This is not just a cartway over which you're going on undeveloped land and you have to build a road. There's already, from what I hear, a pretty nice road there. And so I'm just going to refer to option A, the requested route, which is the Marsh Pit Trail or Road, whatever it's called. Should you choose that route, and at least for a portion of it, I'm thinking you probably will, there was a cost to the landowners that are there to put that in. The Nelson Preserve people need to share in part of that cost. How that's calculated can be debated, but they need to share in part of that cost. That road has also been maintained. In my opinion, that's another consideration of what is it taking to maintain that road. And so that impacts everyone until you get to Mr. Unger's property, where you see where it says Marsh Pit Road, and then it comes down and you can see there's a boundary line there, and then it comes down and kind of loops over. That gets into where Mr. Unger owns those two lots, and that becomes more specific to Mr. Unger in regards to what the actual damages will be, plus where it crosses his property, if option C would be considered. Ultimately, what each lot owner, all the property people are going to get will be determined at a future date. So I'm just looking in aggregate on what are some estimates of those costs would be. The best information I have, and I cannot verify this one way or the other, but this is what I got from Land Services, was that at the on-site, the developer said it cost approximately $250,000 to put that road in. I've asked Land Services to follow up for some documentation on that. I don't have that today. Once the cartway is established for the Nelson Preserve property, that creates 13 lots or 13 landowners. If I take $250,000 divided by 13, that's $19,230. I think that's reasonable to be part of what a deposit could include. Also, a lot of the times, there's a square acreage calculation in regards to what the damages are for the taking, because this is a taking. If you go the full route and you do the calculations based on what Land Services gave me, that comes out to just short of $8,000 just of itself. But then there are additional damages that can be incurred for the property, not just the taking of the land, so it's not theirs to use exclusively. Does it split a lot? Is there a further diminution in value of that particular lot? Those are things that are going to get considered when we get to that phase, okay? Is there loss of use? And so those are considerations ultimately. Also, what are the costs to the county? I have received a request of as high as to make a recommendation of an estimate of damages as high as $250,000, and I think the attorney for the landowners is going to argue that or something similar to that. I can't come up with that number. I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm not saying that he doesn't have more experience in this area than I do. I just can't come up with that calculation. There's also an attorney on the other side who would be significantly lower than that, but didn't necessarily put a number in his letter. You've received both of those letters, so you know what I'm talking about. I think something in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $70,000 as an estimate to damages is reasonable, just based upon my calculations and short involvement in this. And I think that's something you should consider ordering that be deposited with Crow Wing County, again, in a check and wait till it clears, or some other kind of direct deposit, so the cash is sitting in Crow Wing County's bank account, designated only for this purpose. And I would defer to finance or to Tim, what's the best way to get that done, but that is my estimate. If that proves to be too high, the petitioners will be refunded the difference. If it proves to be too low, we will request either more money be deposited, or depending upon what the phase is, we'll require them to pay the additional sums. That is strictly up to you and what you believe the amount of damages should be. I might err on the high side of my estimate to the $70,000 area, and again, this is just a deposit for damages, but please listen to what the attorneys for both sides have to say. When the whole public hearing is over, I'd be happy to come back and answer more questions if you had any. Other than that, I can answer whatever other questions you might have at this point. Otherwise, I'll put my mask back on and go sit back in the audience. The next person can have a turn.
Any questions, Commissioner Coring?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Don, so can you expand on that? So we deposit the $70,000 and then the taking of some land from somebody, then they're compensated out of that $70,000. We're not actually putting in the cartway. The county or the township is not actually putting in the cartway, are they? Are we?
The county is not responsible for any of the expenses. I'm not sure where to look so where you can see me. Maybe it's over Mr. Barrow or Commissioner Barrow's head. The county is not responsible, and nor can it cover any of the costs of establishment of the cartway. I think typically the people who are petitioning for the cartway pay for their surveyors. They make the arrangements for whatever development needs to be. From my review, I think there are times where the petitioner is allowed to or required to put in money, and then the county actually or the township actually pays the people who are doing the work. It appeared to me other times it's done a different way. Are we going to use county employees to build this cartway? I would recommend against that. If that answers your question, Commissioner Corning.
Let me, Mr. Chair, ask another question. So what happens if we go with your estimate and some of the property owners are not happy with that estimate, or they're not happy with what they're getting reimbursed for property that was, in essence, kind of taken away from them. It's still their property, if I understand it correctly, but still it's cutting down trees, on their property. What if they're not happy with the estimate that we come up with or what they're gonna get paid? What's their course? Would it be to go to court? And if they go to court and the judge rules that our number was not correct, we don't have to pick up the difference, do we?
I think that's part of the reason why the attorney for the landowners over which the Cartway is going to go is requesting such a high amount. And I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but he has experienced in other situations where the petitioners for the Cartway refused to pay the amount that was awarded, and the appellate courts have indicated, and I haven't thoroughly researched this one, Commissioner Coring, I've indicated that if the county didn't get enough money up front, potentially there might be some exposure, so I have to disclose that to you. But yes, it has nothing to do with the estimate for the deposit, but at the end of the day, if there's someone who doesn't like the resolution in regards to the Cartway, their remedy is to appeal to the district court. And then whoever doesn't like the district court decision can go to the Court of Appeals. Whoever doesn't like the Court of Appeals decision could at least petition for Minnesota Supreme Court review.
Okay, that's all I've got for right now, but this is I don't know, it seems like a kind of a complicated mess.
I would agree. So with that, I'm going to ask the attorney for the petitioners to come up in 3 minutes to speak, and then the attorney for the landowners to come up and speak for 3 minutes. So if you'll approach.
And is it all right if I take my mask off?
Sure.
Right. Commissioners, Chairman, my name is David Hurd. I represent the petitioner, who is here, Mr. John Middleton, on behalf of the Nelson Preserve. I'd like to thank Mr. Ryan for that great overview of Cartway law. Although I'm not as experienced in this matter as my counterpart, I have done several of these hearings, and it has potential to be very complicated and expensive. Mr. Ryan is correct in determining that the petitioners do in fact qualify for this Cartway. They have the requisite 5 acres. They do not have reasonable access. And when they are qualifying, it is the job of the board to grant their petition. The board needs to grant meaningful access. According to that map, option B gives my client access to roughly 15% of his property. He cannot navigate over that lowland water property. And in fact, that map continues to be altered because of beaver activity. The potential for the land bridge that you see dividing the water, that's not the way it looks currently. That goes up and down, and in fact, that water has been expanding over the past 50 years, ever since my client got it. What the board is here to determine is the route which will be decided. Now, that route must be granted according to what petitioner asked for, absent 3 conditions. The alternate route needs to be less disruptive, needs to be less damaging, and it needs to be in the public's best interest. We're not here to determine option B over option C over option A. We are here to grant option A unless the board determines a less disruptive, less damaging route that is also in the public's best interest. You heard the county attorney indicate there is no public interest in granting any option other than what has been petitioned for. Furthermore, debate can be had on whether it's less disruptive, but according to that map, it still crosses the same amount of the affected landowner's property, and it still would have to take down the same amount of trees. In fact, case law indicates that the board should not only grant the petitioner's selected route, but the board should adhere to the point of the petitioner's beginning, its terminus, and the general course. Now, that blue line on the map is the course. It begins on County Road 105, and it ends on the southern portion of the upper 40 of my client's property. The board is mandated to follow that course, follow the beginning, follow the terminus, and follow the general route. Thankfully, the general route is over a road. There are no trees on this road. I believe it's been determined that 11 property owners use that road up until Mr. Unger's property.
Thank you. 3 minutes are up.
Thank you. I would just like a brief 1 minute to discuss damages. I believe that is another part of what we have to do today. The damages requested for was an amount of $250,000, which has no basis in fact. The damages that are awarded today need to be offset by the benefit incurred to every landowner along the route. That is the total damages minus the benefit to every property, and that is the amount that should be asked for in deposit today. Thank you.
Presumptuous and took off my mask, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And
Good
out
to
of
see you
respect,
again.
I will give you 4 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about damages first. Here's my experience. I'm a Cartway lawyer around the state, and one township on the south side of Lake Mille Lacs by Izades had a situation similar to this. There was a long trail, and at the end of the trail, there was a parcel of property. There was no easement in this case, but people had used this trail forever. And for whatever reason, the people short of the guy at the end cut him off. So he brought a Cartway petition. And the town board held a lot of hearings and went through the process of damages and so on. And they came up with $40,000 for the people along the way. That was appealed. And the district court said, no, you're wrong, township. You have to appraise every tree. And they came up with $250,000 in damages. That case has been in the trial court 4 times at least, the Court of Appeals 3 times. The last decision about a month ago said this judgment's going to go on forever. And the Court of Appeals said that, you know, it's up to the townships and county to get enough money so this doesn't happen. Because if a petitioner doesn't want to pay the damages, you can't force them to do it. They can say, well, fine, I'm going to let that Cartway order sit there. Someday I may want to pay the damages because I may want to use it, but in the meantime, I'm not. So the Court of Appeals is starting to say, well, you know what? If you don't collect enough money for a deposit in advance, then you're going to have to pay it, your taxpayers. Because we can't have this taking private land from one person, putting in the title records a Cartway order, even if it says Cartway isn't open until the damages are paid. We can't have you clouding title and taking these things away without compensation to somebody. It's a basic right. That's why I'm asking for $250,000. It's not, I mean, I don't know what you're going to do, and you don't know what you're going to do either, but you got to think ahead. What's the district court going to do if somebody doesn't like this award? You have 11 properties here, and what you're doing is taking private land from one party and giving private rights to another party. Cartway statute says you got to do it. I know it's distasteful, but you got to do it. But it's up to you to get enough money for compensation to do that. So I'm asking for $250,000 cash, and that's for your protection too. And I don't want to get done with this thing either, and you issue an award, and I have to tell Mr. Unger, well, and the others, well, you got a nice award, but the petitioners don't want to pay it. It's too much money. They don't want to pay it. So that's that. Mr. Ryan did a good job. You know, you ask yourself, well, what's the public benefit in moving the Cartway proposal from the south side of that to the north side? Well, the public benefit is you avoid taking one person's land and giving it to another person. And in the condemnation statute, this was, if you remember a few years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was proper in some cases to take private land from one person and give it to another person. Well, Minnesota, we passed a statute, 117.012, subdivision 2, and it says that you cannot, counties or governments can't take land from one private person and give it to another private person. That's the public interest you need to be concerned about, is if you're going to have to do this Cartway, do it in the least harm to the person who you are taking the land from. Mr. Unger would prefer to go down 33rd, like the commissioner said. Maybe you're not going to do that. But on the north side, I think we could work it out. And they say, well, we don't have meaningful access. But you do. You get there, and okay, so you got to do some wetland mitigation. Nobody likes to do that, and it's a requirement that we all got to meet, but you do it. And you go to the DNR and you work out an agreement to get there. So that south area is full of wetlands. You can barely see it now, but it's full of wetlands, so it's not like it's all high and dry ground. You get to the north side, you work with the DNR. It's going to take you time. It's going to take you money. You got to mitigate. You got to do that.
Stop you now. The 4 minutes are up.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, just a question. I don't recall if we got your name, sir.
David Myers, M-E-Y-E-R-S.
And representing?
Keith Unger, and I will say possibly others, but this is kind of moving fast, so I haven't had a chance to meet with everybody yet. But Keith Unger for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions by anybody?
No.
I have a question, I'm
Mr.
sure you
Hogan.
ask it, but I recall on the on-site, the petitioner's lawyer at that time suggesting possibly that some of these 11 or 13 landowners don't have legal access to that property. How does that play a role in this, and how could you reward them damages if they don't have the legal?
They all have access. If you go to the county recorder's office, and I'll share this with the county attorney because I just got it today when I got here, but there's a deed of a pertinent easement, it's called, and from 2005, there's a Vern Reynolds construction that I think divided this up. It was divided without zoning, so, this is why you do it. But everybody's got access across each other's property. And it was, if you want to go look it up, it was recorded. I can give you a document number, 680150, if you want to see it. It's a 2005 easement. They all got it. It requires maintenance. Everybody's got to help maintain which they do, help maintain the road. And everybody gets access to everybody else's property. Much of this, by the way, option C is, if you can kind of see the yellow going to the southeast. That blue, though, that's Mr. Unger's personal driveway, if you remember we were out there. So it goes down the the 11 owners' driveway, so all of them have to be compensated. But Mr. Unger in particular, if you go to that south one, is also significantly indicated. And it's not just, you're taking land, okay, you're taking land. His house is down there, if you remember, and so you've got severance damages. If you condemn for a road, you don't just get to pay for what it costs for the road. You pay severance. What does it cost to the diminished value of the property? Again, that's why I want a lot of money, because I don't want to argue with you when we're done about how come we're not getting paid.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Coring, any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can hear from the public. Yep. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to be heard? If you'll state your name and address again, I would appreciate it.
Scheffler, 26359 Shandy Trail, Merrifield, Minnesota. First of all, it's kind of embarrassing that 3 attorneys just came up here supposedly looking into cartways and they can't even get the cartway statute right. First of all, the biggest mistake was you referring to access to a parcel. The law actually says access to a tract of land, which in this particular case may or may not have any impact. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, as he said, it's very clear in the statute how it's written, but yeah, it says tract of land, not parcel. As far as the question that hasn't been answered is, when the hell was this the parcel established? That's a huge, huge issue because it determines what amount of acreage is required. I believe it's 1998. Again, the 3 attorneys can correct me if I'm wrong, but if the parcel was established before 1998, has to be between 2 and 5 acres. That sure looks like it's over 5 acres, so that's an incredibly important consideration. Again, maybe it was after 1998 when that parcel was established, but I haven't heard when it was established. Another issue is with regard to the concern of the hill and how that was some sort of consideration. No, it isn't. You can look up a Supreme Court case, Kennedy versus Pepin Township. It addressed a hill. That's where the Cartway was established. So no, it has nothing to do with anything. There's a lot of conflation that's going on. They're mixing and matching which way they want to go. In fact, all three attorneys did it. Another consideration is public interest. No, their analysis was absolutely wrong with regard to the general public interest. There is a public interest with regard to wetland, and there's a number of cases that have been established by the Supreme Court with regard to the public's interest in maintaining wetlands. So if there's going to be a wetland impact, the courts have said that that is a last-ditch effort in wetland mitigation, that the township should go a different direction. Lastly, another thing that I haven't heard yet is the analysis with regard to the public's interest. If the board, and a lot of this stuff, the board needs to make their own findings, is that if the board finds that there's a public interest, well, then shouldn't the public be interested in paying for the Cartway? In any other respect, the petitioner has to pay all the costs. And with regard to if there's some sort of, I believe Mr. Ryan covered that there is an appellate procedure for damages. If there isn't a deposit that's given enough, the township or the county in this particular case, if it comes up more expensive than it was expected, they can get a judgment against the petitioner for the different amount. And obviously the county has a lot of different ways to enforce those judgments. But I mean, these attorneys really need to start looking into the Cartway statute a little bit more if they're going to hold a hearing making these arguments and misleading not only the board but the public themselves that are interested in cartways.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that would like to address this issue? So, Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Chair, you
Yes.
might call 3 times for any other comments, and then a motion would be in order to close the public hearing.
Any other individuals want to speak on this? Calling the 3rd time. Anyone else interested in speaking? I call for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Commissioner Hoag makes the motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Chair, I don't have anything else to present to the board for purposes of today, but I could answer any questions that you may have.
So I want to be clear on the process here. Now, we're going to establish placement of a cartway, but we also, if I understood you correctly, we're going to establish a resolution of damages.
Estimated damages. So you're not awarding any damages today. You're just going to, if you choose to do so, create or pass a resolution of what the estimated damages are in your opinion as the county board, and then ask petitioner to deposit that much cash with the, or check, whatever, with the county for safekeeping as we work through these proceedings, so there is enough money, there's a pot of money to offset county expenses and hopefully enough money to pay whatever the damages are ultimately determined to be, whether by the county board or the judicial system.
And that's a separate action from determining the placement
Yes.
of the cartway.
So, Mr. Chair, can I try to summarize? Because
Yes.
if I understand it, then maybe it'll help. First, you got to determine whether or not a cartway is necessary or not. Is there access to this parcel already? The answer to that question is yes. I don't think you do anything. If you think that there is a cartway that's necessary in order for this person to access the property, do you need any other information from staff to determine where the location of that cartway would be? The petitioner is clearly asking for option A, and you hear from the county attorney that in order to deviate from that, you have to have compelling reasons. So you can, is there more information that you want from staff to help you make a determination if A is not the option that you choose. The county attorney is recommending, while this process is going on, that you ask the petitioner to put a deposit down to cover the costs of reimbursing the landowner for any land that's taking, any severance value associated with the diminishment of the value of the remaining portions of the property, as well as any of the county's costs. How'd I do?
Works.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Coring.
The first point that Mr. Hool made was, is there access now? So I guess my question is did they just buy this property and now they want access? Or if they've owned this property for a long time, how did they get into the property before? Is that a legitimate question?
I believe when we did the walkthrough that they have owned this property for a significant number of years.
That's what I thought.
Pardon me?
I said, that's what I thought. So
I'm not
how
sure.
have they been accessing it up to this point then?
I can attempt to answer that, Mr. Commissioner, and if I'm not accurate, I would call on the attorney for petitioners to correct me. My understanding is that the Nelson Preserve has owned this property for some time and that they have used it the whole period of time, not continuous necessarily like they're there every day, but they've used it for hunting. The road where the option A, where it is roughly now, has been the road that they have used for a long, long time, but they've had, and I believe it was with permission, they had no legally enforceable right to use the road because it was more of a permissive use. There was some conversation when I was meeting with council earlier today that this may or may not have been a township road at one point, and then when it was developed, it was vacated as a township road. I don't know if that's true or not, but they have been using basically the route that they're requesting. However, at this point in time, because of the neighborhood dispute, for lack of saying a different thing, then and I don't mean to create another issue, I'm not trying to, they aren't able to get in there right now, so they're requesting the Cartway so that they can force and have legally enforceable access to their property. Close?
Understand, Commissioner Coring?
Yes, that makes total sense. So they've had access before, but there's possibly a little dispute, and the landowner said, "No, you can't go across here anymore." So now they're trying to get a cartway, correct?
I think that's correct. I
Okay.
think previously they must have just hiked in across the other properties. I would assume, looking at the map, that would be the only way to get into that property. No.
So can I ask another question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
To the parliamentarian, Mr. Hool, so are we required to make a decision on this today after we've just closed the public hearing? Are we required to make a decision today, or could we give it some more thought until the next county board meeting?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner Coring, the answer to your question is no. Nobody, in fact, I think staff is suggesting, Don is suggesting that the only thing that you establish today is a damage deposit, and tell us if there's any other information that you need in order to determine route. I do have a question for Mr. Ryan, though, if that is okay.
Yes, go ahead.
The deposit does it have to be a cash deposit, or can the petitioner deposit a bond, like a surety bond?
The statute allows for a bond, and I recommend against that. And the research I have done, and one of the things I read was a primer put together by a different Cartway lawyer who is out of Duluth, whose name I don't remember at the moment, but it was recommended to me, and so I read through it. And I think his recommendation was that you get cash in the bank so you have something that you know is solid and good. A bond may or may not, if you can get a bond for something like this, they may or may not want to pay out, and other sureties, like a bank saying they'll do it, if the bank fails, you're out the money, and so that's why I think cash in the bank is the best, and that's my recommendation. When I say cash in the bank, I mean we have it in our account.
And then the second question is, what do we know about the history here of the potential for a prescriptive easement? We understand that the parties, that the use of the road had been with permission. What do we know about the history of that? Do we believe there's a prescriptive easement here already or not?
I have no information I can give you on that, Mr. Hool, and I have no opinion I can present today. Earlier today, when I did meet with the attorneys for both sides and a representative from both sides, we had some discussions about other alternatives to a cartway, and I think for purposes of today, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll continue to have conversations with them most likely.
A prescriptive easement would be an easement by use. You've used it long enough and there was no exchange. Now, I hear Mr. Ryan saying there was an exchange of permission. Once there is an exchange of permission, I don't believe you can get a prescriptive easement because you were granted permission to use it, which can be withdrawn.
I'm not gonna pontificate on that question today. I am more than happy to look into it and have discussion with each of the attorneys. The issue today is the cartway.
It is another way for them to resolve it, though, is to figure out whether an easement already occurs or already is there.
In order to do that, they would have to commence, if there's not agreement, they would have to commence litigation in a district court, and then the possibilities of successfully getting a prescriptive easement from a district court becomes speculative, and I don't know of any case law that says that becomes an enforceable easement because of the speculation of whether the district court will or won't rule in their favor. And so, again, I don't feel we should be pontificating on that today, but I will explore it with the attorneys for both sides.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Commissioner Coring.
Don, there's a big difference between 250,000 and the number that you're recommending.
Even my attorney math, Commissioner Coring would agree with you.
Pardon me?
Even my attorney math would agree with you. There's a big difference between 70,000 and 250,000.
Right. Okay, so with that said, so what have we done? Can you just expound a little bit on that 70,000? Did we send a forester out there from our staff to look at the trees if this is where it's going? And go ahead.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Coring, I don't believe we've sent a forester out there. I did have Ryan from Land Services talk with the foresters and provide somewhat of an estimate. My understanding of the road as it exists today and the preferred route by petitioners, it's mostly developed. And again, I haven't been there. I have been told there still are some trees within what the 33-foot cartway would be. So that could become an issue. I can't give you a concrete sequential answer on that. What I've done is done my best to take the information available to me on what the cost of putting in the road was. Again, I don't have anything on the maintenance, and then try to divide it out between the various different landowners. There is a dispute or a discussion that the Nelson Preserve individuals had a chance when the marsh pit was created to participate in it. They say they did not. I don't have an answer to that. I'm just sharing you the information I heard today. And again, ultimately in making the determinations, I think that's something that I'll dig into should the board want me to make some recommendations in the future.
So, Mr. Chair, one more question. So we don't necessarily have to establish the cartway today, do we? Or are we just setting the damages today?
Should the board decide it does not want to establish the cartway route today, but does want to establish an estimate of the damages? So again, you're not establishing the damages. Right. It's just a good faith estimate because we don't have the information to make the final decision. You could do that. Part of that conversation of necessity can change with if a route is or is not determined. If we backed up all the way to when we first received the petition, I probably would have tried to make or suggested we make some requirement of a deposit at that point in time, but we didn't. We proceeded forward, so we're here today for the purposes stated in the notice that went out for the public hearing. So it's discretionary with you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Coring, on what action you want to take here today. You could just close the public hearing and reset the Cartway location for a different day. You can set it all for a different day if you want to, in my opinion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, here's what my opinion is today is, and Don, tell me if this is kind of the way it works at court. Somebody goes into court, the two parties are there, the judge says, go out in the hallway and try to work it out. And so I guess what my feeling is today is that we postpone this until the next county board meeting, and we tell parties that are involved in this to work out a deal between themselves that they both agree with, and then we address it at the next county board meeting. That would be my advice.
So, Mr. Ryan, if we established a deposit and it required a survey and an appraisal, would that, that comes out of that deposit, correct? The cost for those items?
Cost of the survey and any appraisals or any of that, the cost is to be borne by the petitioner. If we have money deposited, then we would probably deduct the cost of those out of those deposited funds, or the petitioner could hire someone else. I mean, each side, the petitioner and the people over whose the land the Cartway's going, they can hire their own appraisers, they can hire their own surveyors, and, you know, probably if they do that, you're going to get different information from both. Higher or lower, the route hopefully will, once it's established, would be the same. But yes, that ultimately would be the cost of the petitioners.
So my question, what I was trying to get at was if we would table this and we would ask the staff to provide us with additional information, really that's a piece of the information that we should have at hand to establish that deposit. And if we don't have money in the account, we have no way of collecting that should we incur some expenses. And you said the county can't pay for this, correct?
Correct. The county is not to incur costs.
And yet if we direct staff to go out there,
So that would be reimbursed from the monies in the deposit. So the
Okay.
county's incurring costs right now just with staff being here, with you being here. And ultimately, again, part of the reason for the deposit would be that we would then determine what that expense is. And we would deduct that, and we would keep books so everyone can see it. We would deduct that from what was on deposit so that the county's not incurring that expense as we go forward. The
Okay.
county's not obligated, in my opinion, to go out and hire its own surveyors. In
Right.
speaking with attorneys, typically the parties go out and hire their own. The same with appraisers. We don't necessarily have to go out and hire an appraiser. We could require a large enough deposit where you want to hire your own experts. I think that is permissible under the law. I just don't know that that's the standard procedure. And I would have to have conversations with attorneys who have been more involved with Cartways than I have, or discuss it with my counterparts in some other counties. As I told you, I'm not a cornucopia of experience in this particular topical area.
Mr. Chair, I think maybe it's been answered or not, but would we not need a route determined before we could establish estimated damages?
Well, if you look at the map on the wall, there doesn't seem to be much dispute on the route until you get to what's option B in yellow. And so then you have option B and option C, then option A that goes all the way down. So we can do a square footage or square acreage, calculation that generally will cover all of those options that are being suggested on that map. Again, it's an estimate. In regards to the cost of creating the marsh pit, road, trail, whatever it is, and any maintenance that's specific to either an individual lot or all the lots in general, a general calculation or determination can be made for purposes of a deposit, in my opinion. If we had an exact route, obviously we'll be able to get that surveying, someone will be able to get that surveying done, and we'll be able to have more precise information than if we're just looking at it in the abstract with some just general different options.
Well, it just seems like we would be I don't want to, maybe spending or wasting dollars by researching three options that if we were to determine, and again, I believe if I heard right, maybe from both attorneys, that option A is the one we should be focusing on, unless we can prove differently, that we should just determine damages based on option A.
Estimate damage.
Estimated damages based on option A, rather than spending time on B and C. But I'm just trying to set this, and I agree, we could table until we have those numbers, but if there's any harm to select a route today, and then go back and do the estimated damages and reconvene, or how we want to do that, to see if that's going to be satisfactory to the both parties. I'm not sure, again, the proper procedure that would eliminate wasting a lot of time and money.
So I will willingly continue to communicate with attorneys for both sides, generically speaking, and have discussions on whether they will or won't be able to reach a settlement or some kind of private easement agreement outside of the Cartway petitions, which is kind of what I think Commissioner Coring was suggesting. The issue before the board is whether or not the petitioners qualify for the Cartway. Nobody has argued to that they don't, and in my opinion, they do. And so that means then you must establish a Cartway if they've petitioned to it, and you have to establish a route. Once the route's established, we can get more of a definition in regards to what the damages are going to be. And then we would come back for a future hearing in order to, again, take evidence or testimony on what the impact of that route would be, so that you, the board, then would make a determination what the damages are on a per landowner basis, parcel basis. We can parse all the words we want to. There are a certain number of impacted people, and whether you're looking at the Cartway statute or the town road statute, or even the eminent domain statute, there are a lot of terms that are used interchangeably, and it gets somewhat confusing. So I'm trying to just stay succinct when I say the petitioners and the affected landowners. So the issue isn't, can we negotiate a deal with them for you? The issue is, do you have the information you believe you need to make a decision on a deposit and on a selection of a route? If you believe you do, I think you should move forward. If you believe you need more information, then you need to let staff know that. We can get that information for you. We will continue to track what our costs are, and ultimately the petitioner will pay us or reimburse us for staff time and all that stuff. It's just typically you want the money in the bank first as opposed to trying to go collect it later.
So Commissioner Hoag, with Mr. Unger, I walked the property for option A, and actually he and I and Commissioner Brecken walked option C at the same time, and option A is up on top of a ridge, and then it goes down to Nelson Lake, I believe it is. Option C, and there isn't a lot of topography, which slants towards the north, and the wetland there that divides the Nelson property. There isn't a lot of topography there, and I think Mr. Simonson would agree that it's a pretty easy slope there. But personally, I would, to Commissioner Coring's point, I would like to get more information on that before we make a decision on where that cartway should go. That's my position. In terms of the dollar amount, I'm going to look for my fellow commissioners to figure out what that number should be and make the motion to put that into place. So
I just
Commissioner
have one question. Did the attorney from Nelson's Preserve give us an estimate?
No, I did not.
Okay. So at this time, it would appear to me that the deposit is the right order to go, and then determining whether we want to move forward with the placement of the cartway. That would be how I would see it being done, rather than the reverse, which would, in my opinion, be getting the cart before the horse kind of approach. So at this point, I would look for a motion for a number to establish a deposit for the Nelson Group to place in the depository of the county. We've had a range from almost nothing up to 250,000. So there's a lot of options in there, folks.
Now, that would cover all damages?
It's an estimate that would be used to offset county costs and cover damages to the extent it's there.
Damages including the, well, everything along option A if we so choose.
Yes, and I can't argue with attorney for the affected landowners that the more money you have in the bank, the safer we are, because that's a true statement. But you get to a certain amount of money and it's going to end everything. It just isn't, realistic. So when I created my recommendation of that 50 to 70, and I said err on the $70,000 side, I was going through trying to do my best job at estimating expenses. You're not tied to that. You can say you're not going to require a deposit. You can go as high as you want to. But at some point in time, it becomes prohibitive for the petitioners to then proceed forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Don, does your estimate include the cost of the property that would be taken?
Yes.
Does your
Now,
estimate?
when I say yes,
Your best value.
it only includes the square acreage based upon the value per acre that I got from land services.
Just the road?
Yeah.
Does your estimate include any potential for severance damages?
What do you mean by severance?
If we have diminished the value of a property because of the taking?
No, it does not.
Okay, and does it include any estimate for county staff?
It includes roughly a $5,000 estimate for county expenses, which might be a little light, but that's what I got from land services.
So I wanted to unbundle that just so that you would understand how he arrived at the figure that he arrived at, and if you think it's okay, great. If you think that you should add some more because of the potential, then you can at least have a dialogue about, do you think $5,000 is enough for the county's costs? Yes or no? Do you think there is any potential for severance damage here? Yes or no? I think the amount is really based on trying to protect our exposure, and our exposure is those three things, I think.
Well, and I also included in my calculations trying to make a determination on what a per parcel cost might be for the actual creation and maintenance of the road originally. Whether Nelson Preserve was given that opportunity you spoke to or not, I still think you've got an improved road there, and that's part of the cost of creating, that's part of the damages.
Mr. Chair, so maybe off of Tim's suggestions, say we were to request a damages of $25,000 today, which we know then we're covered for staff's time. Can we then come back and then have a second, once the route and having some type of estimated damages, and then increase that or have a second award of damages?
In my opinion, you can adjust the damages as many times as you, up or down, as many times as you believe is appropriate during the course of the proceedings. And then if you increase them up, you can require that those additional sums be deposited with the county before the county's going to allow it to proceed any further.
So with that, I mean, at $25,000, we know that our costs are covered for probably to see this thing through as far as staffs, and then we determine. Because it sounds like there's more research or more information needed to determine even what potential damages could be on the existing road. We don't know that yet, so I'm just not in favor of a $250,000 when we have so many unanswered questions. That this would keep the process moving with a guarantee that we've got funds to cover staff's costs and or surveying whatever we need to determine then more accurate damages once the route is approved.
So question.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead,
question.
Commissioner Coring.
Back to Mr. Hool. Mr. Hool characterized it as a taking. Now, technically, when they're not, the people aren't buying that 33 feet, they're getting an easement to go across it. So would taking be the right term? Does that make sense?
Commissioner Coring, Mr. Hool is nodding at me after I pointed my finger at myself, so I would answer that question. It is a taking by law. This is
Okay.
the government, in essence, exercising our authority of eminent domain, and we're taking this property for purposes of a cartway. I think that's well settled black letter law, and there's no point in discussing otherwise.
Okay, so one other question, Don, then, who pays the, if you will, property taxes on that cartway land? Is that then, is somebody paying property taxes on that into the future?
I don't know the answer to that question, Commissioner Coyne, off the top of my head. I can defer to Gary or Ryan, but I'm assuming that the landowners are still responsible for the taxes, just like if they granted a private easement across the land. But I want to make sure I get you the right answer, and I see Gary's coming up to the microphone.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Coring, it depends on ownership, and it depends on how it affects the value of a parcel. So if it doesn't diminish a property's value, you could in essence say there's property tax paid. If a road is routed where it diminishes a property's value, say 200,000, and goes down to 180 because of the location of the road or easement, there's an actual loss in value and there's a loss in property taxes. Most of these private roads or private easements, most of them, we treat them as like every property has a driveway. So you still pay property taxes because it's part of your parcel, and everybody needs reasonable access. So most of them all pay property taxes. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Other questions? Concerns? Well, we're not in a public hearing at this point, so. I'm looking for a number for the deposit.
Well, I would stick with the 25,000.
You're making that a motion?
Make that a motion.
Do I have a second to the motion of $25,000 for the deposit? Do I have a second? Do I have a second? That motion fails. Back to reconsidering number.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner Coring.
Mr. Chairman, I would go with the county attorney's estimate of 70,000, and that's a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Coring for the deposit to be set at $70,000. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Franzine. Therese, if you would call the roll call, please.
Commissioner Coring,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag,
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows,
Chair votes aye. Deposit will be set at $70,000, and that motion passes.
And Mr. Chair, we will schedule this on your next county board agenda. Is there any other information that you would like staff to pursue to help you to move the issue forward?
Commissioner Hoag?
Maybe one, Mr. Chair. Don, again, it was mentioned multiple times on the on-site that there were some of these parcels, and I don't remember the exact number, 5 or 6 of them, that didn't, there was some question in the language of the easements. Is that something we should look into?
I've already had discussions with attorneys for both sides, cursory discussions, in regards to the accesses. Whether you really can, or even if you can, do you want to grant a cartway over tax forfeited land? Because there's a short portion of this cartway that involves that, but the petitioners already have an easement, so probably doesn't qualify for a cartway there anyway. We'll adjust that. I'm told by the attorney for the affected landowners that there was easement, or there is an easement access. He acquired a copy of that, like he told you today. He said he'll give it to me. I will look into that to make sure that there isn't an issue, and if there is an issue, I'll work with the attorneys to attempt to resolve that issue, short of having to have you all deal with it. And I can certainly report back, or if I need to, I'll bring it to you for action.
Yeah, I mean, I would just hate like heck to see this come back to us if we find that there's other parcels that may have a similar legality.
In addition, I would like the staff to establish that topography, if the cartway isn't option A, and it would happen to be option C, is the topography such that it could be placed there and not have a serious erosion control problem for the wetland to the north of that option? And I think option B, is it, on the other side of the wetland? Just take a look at that too. Mr. Unger and I did walk that parcel also, and I don't believe the topography is very steep there. Just so that we have that information before us from the staff.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in regards to option, I just want to make sure my notes are accurate, if I can. In regards to option B in your comment, you're looking just for topography or the appropriateness, or what are you looking for that?
Well, if it could be appropriately put there and not cause an erosion issue to the wetland, which is on the north side of that.
Okay.
And Commissioner Hoag.
To that, I think there was mention that water level changes due to some beaver. You know, again, if we put a road in there and then have a wet year, is that road going to be underwater? So that there's some reassurance that it's in a zone that's not going to be impacted by a high water year.
Got it. There being nothing further, Mr. Chair, I'll go back into the audience, unless someone else has a question or something.
Mr. Hool, a question to you on procedure. Do we need to have a motion to table this action, or do we just not take action and it's moved to the next county board meeting?
Motion to table is always going to be more clear, but you have a petition. We're acting on the petition. You're moving it forward. Do I think it's a requirement? No. Is it clearer? Yes.
Then I would ask for a motion to take action, which I'm assuming, a motion to table at this point. I would.
So moved.
Commissioner Franzine makes the motion to table.
Second.
Second by
Chairman,
Commissioner Hoag.
That, but I guess the question would be, is that when you say a motion to table, then we could take it up anytime. It could be next meeting, it could be the next one after that. Is it time certain, or is we just tabling it for now, I'm assuming?
Let me ask the motion maker. Commissioner Franzine, would you like to make that time specific?
I'll make it until the next meeting, and if we don't have the proper information, then we can table it again.
Commissioner Hoag as a second. You're okay with that? Commissioner Coring, it's time specific to our next county board meeting.
Yes, that sounds fine to me.
Therese, if you'll call the roll call.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye. That motion is tabled.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can I ask you a question? 1599, the 60-day rule may apply. And could we get petitioner's approval to table so we don't end up in a position where this cartway is just granted?
1 second. Why don't you come up to the microphone and start over so we have it recorded?
I'm really sorry to intrude. The Minnesota statute 1599, the 60-day rule, you're probably all aware of that, may apply to cartways. And could we have petitioner agree in writing that they will not invoke that statute and have this automatically approved?
If you would, please.
Minnesota Statute 1599, Subdivision 2A says that a town must approve or deny within 60 days a written request relating to zoning, septic systems, expansion of the metropolitan service area for a permit, license, or other governmental approval of an action. That is not what we are here. The 60-day rule does not apply.
Mr. Chair, my research, both attorneys actually correctly state their particular positions. There is no law that says it does or doesn't apply. I mean, and again, I've just read some cursory stuff on it. We have been told by petitioner in the past that there is no big rush here and that they're not concerned about timelines, and I have not been told that that has changed. Now, that was when there was different representation than there is today, but I would just share that with the county board as well. And I already made a note to research the timeline question.
Mr. Chair, when was the petition filed?
I don't have that.
And while they're doing that, what's the date of the next county board meeting?
27th.
October 27th.
And when was the petition filed? We can move forward with the agenda and come back to that issue if you'd like more time.
Yes.
This is the petition, and it was signed in April of 2019.
Originally, it was filed in April of 2019. However, again, then there were some procedural issues, and so we started everything over in conjunction with Mr. Barnum, who was the attorney at the time. So if the concern is from the date of the petition, we're well beyond that anyway. I will discuss with counsel for the petitioners. Obviously, they've taken the position here today that the 60 rule day doesn't apply, and so I would think there won't be a problem getting them to waive it if it somehow is determined to apply. Is that accurate, sir?
That's correct.
You understand?
That's fine, as long as it's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, that was a long one.
I didn't make my 11 o'clock criminal court meeting.
Mr. Chair, you may
Good
want
thing
to
I
ask
covered.
if the county attorney has any other business.
Do you have any other business as you are on our agenda also?
You heard from me enough today.
Okay. Thank
I
you
do
very
not.
much.
Thank you.
County Sheriff? Anything from the office today, Mr. Meyer? County Administrator?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I have a senior management team update for you. Yesterday we met, and you can imagine that we are paying a little bit closer attention to our COVID numbers. And we're paying attention probably to a statistic, and it depending on how we look at it, do we want to look at like the total cases since the inception of COVID? Well, that goes all the way back to March. Most of those cases are not currently hospitalized. Most of those cases aren't currently sick. But it's the cumulative total. And so that's an accurate reflection of the cumulative total. Probably paying a little bit more attention to a measure that is the 14-day new case count per 10,000 residents of population. It allows you to kind of give an idea of, trending for your size, and also comparative data to compare one county to the next, even though they have quite a bit different populations. So it is concerning to us that as we watch the 14-day case count per 10,000 residents, we are seeing that in Crow Wing County that has increased from about 6 to 7 as recently as mid-September, and we are now in close to I think we will top the 30 range in the next report, 30 cases per 30 new cases per day for the last 14 days per 10,000 residents. And so it's a case rate, it's a new case rate figure, and to watch that go from 6 to 7 to pushing 30. We're seeing the impacts of that in our community too, aren't we? Schools that are closing, businesses that are impacted. And so it's important that we continue to monitor what's going on because of the disruption to our community, to families trying to provide daycare when their school closes with not a whole lot of notice, people that are trying to get to work because they need their kids taken care of, and historically, that would be school. Businesses that are having to close their doors because people are testing positive. And what we're seeing with this is community transmission. This is not, I think I was worried in the spring that all of our seasonal residents, all of our visitors, that would cause a case spike. And probably because we are largely outdoors, we did not see that. We're seeing it now as we go back indoors. But many of our seasonal residents, if they're going to go, are gone, and many of our summer visitors aren't here right now either. And so essentially, this is local. And so it is how well we contain this will depend on how well we act as it relates to others. And that's just simply what we know. We don't want that case count to grow any higher. And we are reacting to that. So I would tell you that we needed to stop in-person contact in our child support unit because of a positive case. And that's a result of the kinds of impacts that businesses are experiencing in our community every day. And so we are concerned about that impact on our community. I'm happy to answer questions about that if you have any.
I don't. Anyone? Commissioner Coring?
We also, Mr. Chair, talked about the CARES Act, and so we updated you guys at Budget Committee last Thursday. So I'm not going to go into that too much, other than we also had a conversation about, I think it's October 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. I don't see Nick in the room. I think it's October 23rd that we're asking departments to submit any final requests for Crow Wing County's use of CARES Act dollars in the not too distant future. We also had a discussion about the CIP and where we're at relative to the discussion on CIP. I think there's some more work to be done there. We're paying attention to whether or not the degree to which we can get fund balance growth out of operating performance for 2020, the degree to which we may see any fund balance growth related to the CARES Act. And I think that will inform the discussion about the size and scope of the CIP that we should entertain for 2021. We have another risk on that horizon, and that is the state budget and where the state is at. And so we use all of our county program aid right now goes to funding our CIP. We supplement that with some additional levy dollars. If the state goes into session in January and because of the state's budget crisis decides that they would reduce county program aid as an example, that could put us in a bind as well, and could also have an impact on the CIP and the degree to which we could move that forward. So there's a couple of risks on our horizon that we're watching, monitoring. We talked about our continuous improvement efforts as well as some past SMT agenda items, and we have a lot of things that were sort of in the hopper, if you will, and then COVID broke, and some of those items have gone to the wayside. We are not pursuing them. We wanted to make sure we don't lose track of them. So we brainstormed a bit about what are the items that we need to put into our parking lot to return to, but that we can't get to today, just so we don't forget stuff. And then we also talked about moving the SMT meetings back to Teams meetings. We had gone to in-person meetings. And out of concern for our rising case numbers, we are going to go back to virtual meetings. As it turns out, a lot of what we did in March and April will turn out to have been a dry run for what we are probably experiencing right now. In terms of Crow Wing County and closing our doors, we will try to have the most surgical approach to closures that we can muster. So we are having conversations about those customer-facing counters. Should we be taking our workforce and dividing it into two cohorts, one of which, and they work separately, physically separately from each other, so that if there was an outbreak, it doesn't take the whole counter staff down at the same time. We're talking about that kind of mitigating strategies similar to what we did back in March. We will try our darndest not to lock all of Crow Wing County's doors again. We were still open for business. We know we can do it that way if we have to do it that way, but we would prefer not to. And so that surgical approach is like I'm describing with child support. Now, if that outbreak had spread within community services, we may need to consider closing the door, still providing services in the alternative delivery method for a building. So the size of our reaction, we will try very hard to make sure that the size of our reaction is directly proportional to the risk that we're currently under. If we had a widespread outbreak among Crow Wing County employees, could I foresee a possibility that we could still go back to locking our doors or restricting public access to your meetings? Yeah, I can imagine a set of circumstances in which you should consider that. I don't believe we're there today, and we will try to be as surgical as we can in making any recommendations about that for you moving forward. Happy to answer questions about that or anything else going on with county government.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just encourage people, the county board members, to do a little research. There's actually been some news from the World Health Organization. If you go online and look up World Health Organization, I'm just going to read one quote. This is in quotations from a Dr. Nabarro. He says, "We at the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of controlling this virus." I think the World Health Organization, and if you read the article here, I haven't read the whole thing, but if you read the article, they are starting to change their position about locking down, and they think it's actually having a worse effect, and especially on poor people. So anyway, it's just something to think about. I think I still say that we're gonna look back, a year or two from now, and I think this lockdown is going to have such an effect, not only economically, but mental health wise on people. I know people that have family members in a nursing home and they can't even go visit them. It's having an effect on the people that are staying at the nursing home. It's having an effect on their family. I don't know. I don't exactly know what to think about this, but I will say that when the World Health Organization is saying that they do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of controlling the virus, I think we need to start listening to that. So thank you.
Any additional business? With that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Franzine.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hoag. Therese, if you would call the roll.
Commissioner Franzine?
Aye.
Commissioner Coring?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoag?
Aye.
Commissioner Barrows?
Chair votes aye, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thought we withdrew from the WHO.